So we can classify air pollutants into two groups, primary or secondary. And remember, there are some natural sources of air pollution, lots of particulates that we can't avoid, dust, pollen, ash from volcanoes. Volcanoes release a lot of carbon dioxide and sulfur. But humans are the real problem. When we burn fossil fuels, we can release carbon dioxide. Remember, we can use certain things to limit some of these, right? We can use a catalytic converter to cut down on the nitrogen oxides and the carbon monoxide. We can use scrubbing to reduce the amount of sulfur dioxide that's released. But what happens is the reactions that do take place, and that's why they're called secondary, because they react with something in the air and form a brand new chemical. They're not primarily put there. And what they usually react with is water. And so sulfur dioxide becomes sulfuric acid, right? We had H2O and SO2, and we get H2SO4. That is acid rain, sulfuric acid. Nitrogen's another one. When that comes out of our engines, if we don't use catalytic converters, that can form nitric acid. The other way that some of these secondary pollutants are formed is a reaction with energy. For example, O2, which is not considered a pollutant, it's an ingredient for us to be alive. O2 can react with sunlight, ultraviolet light, and form O3, which is a very important chemical we'll come back to called ozone. So the things that come out of fossil fuels are typically primary, and the acids that react with water are secondary. Well, just like clean water, mining problems, we recognized all of this by the 1970s that we were polluting our planet. Along with the Clean Water Act, we came out with the Clean Air Act. And this, very much like RCRA, RCRA, which set up the toxins that were hazardous and bad, this identified the air pollutants that were the most harmful to humans. And so those are classified as a special category called criteria pollutants. They meet the criteria for being the most harmful. And there's 6 of them. We've already learned about particulate matter. Once again, very small particles, dust, ash, cigarette smoke. We've learned about lead, which is a toxic heavy metal. Remember, we used to burn that in gasoline. Lead, remember, can lead to developmental issues, especially in children. Sulfur dioxide, the one that comes from coal. Nitrogen oxide, also from coal and things like gasoline. Carbon monoxide we'll cover today, and ozone we'll get to later. So the catalytic converter kind of was a result of that 1973 law, making that mandatory in passenger vehicles. Remember that it is not mandatory in things like lawnmowers, tractors, go-karts. Anything that burns gasoline that's smaller does not have to have a catalytic converter and is therefore pumping this stuff directly into the atmosphere. In 1990, they went back and looked at the Clean Air Act, and they added a couple of things. They started to require scrubbers in power plants. That's where we mix it with calcium carbonate limestone, and it bonds to form calcium sulfate and takes the sulfur out of the coal gas. And the cap and trade program, where they said you could trade credits for pollution between companies to help limit. So this law did some good things. It started to make progress. We spend 93% of our lives inside of a container, either our house or a vehicle. I mean, we sleep hours and hours of our life, and that's usually indoors. Most people don't sleep outside. So it adds up over time. We simply don't get outside enough. And because our homes are so locked down, we've got good insulation and sealed windows, we typically suffer from not stirring the air up enough. Good ventilation, good airflow. So that's why, especially in the springtime, I know a lot of you probably suffer from allergies and the pollen gets sky high, but it is good to get the windows open and let that air flow through and blow out some of the particulate matter that would have settled over the winter. There's actually a condition called sick building. Usually happens a lot of times with new like offices. People start working there and all of a sudden you hear 3 or 4 staff members, I have a headache today. I do too. I'm actually feeling nauseous. Oh my gosh, me too. They eventually figure out they're just not getting enough airflow. And these things like new carpeting, they have lots of chemicals in them. That's that smell that you get from a new car or a new carpet. A lot of flooring products, furniture even has a new smell to it. That's formaldehyde that you're smelling. Look at all the places this is found. Plywood. Do you know what plywood is? It's sheets of wood kind of pressed together. And it's actually glued. That adhesive inside of there has formaldehyde in it. You should not throw things like plywood into your little campfire in the backyard. You're burning toxic chemicals into the air. And you're sitting right by that fire, probably breathing into them. Keep plastics, plywood, treated wood, all of that should not be burned. I already mentioned furniture, upholstery, carpeting. All your smoking products produce formaldehyde when they're vaporized. Doesn't matter if it's vaping, tobacco. A little bit at a time is no big deal, like with most toxins, but it's that lifetime exposure. The important things to do are to make sure you air it out once in a while. Make sure that you do open the windows. Radon is radioactive, just like uranium. It's in the rocks. It's a naturally occurring radioactive element. And so over time, it can go through the cracks in the bedrock, can get into our groundwater, leach in through pipes. And so we find radon in our water, and it especially likes to build up in homes that have basements. If you do buy a house at some point, they're going to ask you, do you want to do radon testing? Women are susceptible to birth defects if there's high levels of radon in the home. Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States. One other criteria pollutant that I want you to know very well is carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is incredibly dangerous. It will kill you. It is colorless and odorless, and it comes from leftover carbon that did not completely burn in some sort of fossil fuel. And this is why you don't run your car in the garage with the door down. College Board wants you to know that carbon monoxide is an asphyxiant. You also should have a carbon monoxide detector in your home. You don't want to keep that right by a fireplace or by your furnace. You want to put it near a bedroom.